intentional and that it is being investigated as a possible terrorist attack. Though officials have no reason to believe it was in any way connected to what happened in New Orleans this morning. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian joins us now from Washington. Ken, what is the latest?
Well, Alicia, we all heard the FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge in New Orleans and other local officials say today that they believe this suspect did not act alone. But that appears to have been based on a misunderstanding, as you described, of some surveillance video where they thought they saw other people, not the suspect, planting those two bombs, those improvised explosive devices that they found on the streets of New Orleans. They have now ruled out, they located those people and have ruled them out as suspects. They were just bystanders. That was a misreading of the video evidence. And that, I'm told, was the basis for that FBI agent and others to say that there were others out there, that this suspect didn't act alone, that they were looking for bad people, as one of the officials put it. That does not appear to be the case. There is no active manhunt for other suspects. It does appear that they are heading in the direction of deciding that this person acted alone, that this was a lone wolf, potentially ISIS-inspired attack. They're not saying it definitively because they have to run down every lead, and often in these cases, people who have been radicalized are communicating with others online, so he may have had Confederates in that sense. But the idea that there are people running around New Orleans who are posing a danger to the public such that they had to postpone the Sugar Bowl by a day, that just does not appear to be the case at this hour, according to our law enforcement sources.
So given that you have law enforcement outside of the suspect's home in Houston, Texas, what is it they are hoping to learn there?
Well, they would do that as a matter of course. It's unclear whether there are other people there, whether they're just doing a search, but they're gonna run down every potential place where this person had any ties, and of course his entire digital footprint. So they want to learn everything they can about him and what he was doing and who he was communicating with, what he was saying online, on social media, or other places. And getting a warrant and searching his residence would be one of the first things they would do.
Kendall, when we talk about potential ties to ISIS, the question that we're asking, of course, because the suspect did have an ISIS flag in the back of his truck. We heard earlier from Director Brennan talking about the fact that that could be financial. It could simply be in the form of encouragement. What are law enforcement officials telling you about the way in which they are probing those specific ties?
Well, they're doing what they do in every case. Again, looking at this digital footprint. We all have that. They're going to look and see who is this person communicating with online. And let's remember, this is a person born in the United States in Texas, is an Army veteran, spent years in the U.S. military, appeared to have a normal life at one point, appeared to have been a realtor, and at some point was radicalized, they believe. And now they need to figure out how that was. They're looking, of course, at any potential overseas travel, and then they would run down who this person communicated with. There's a lot of different levels of ISIS involvement, right? We've seen attacks that have been quote unquote ISIS directed, meaning that people were communicating with folks overseas and being urged to take specific action. And then the more common variation is ISIS inspired, which is just some disturbed individual who became radicalized in the United States, mainly by marinating in online propaganda, and then decided to carry out an attack. They're not saying what this was, what they've learned so far, but they're running down every possibility.
Ken, can you talk to us about what we are watching transpire in Vegas, what law enforcement is telling you about any belief of connection between these two incidents?
Yeah, apologies. I have not focused on Las Vegas at all. Other colleagues have been looking into that, except that I've been told by the people who were reporting on this investigation, the truck attack in New Orleans, that there is no connection. There's no known connection between the Las Vegas incident and the New Orleans incident, Alicia.
NBC News' Ken Delaney. And Ken, as always, thank you. I want to bring in now Frank Figluzzi, NBC News senior national security analyst and former FBI assistant director for counterintelligence. Frank, pull back the curtain for us. What is it likely that the FBI is doing now?
Well, for sure, as you've seen reported, they are active at FBI Houston. They've, at one point, they cordoned off a street. They asked people not to come down the street. This is in the area of the residence or believed residence of the subject. It's all about determining a couple of things. First and foremost, any evidence that he really was engaged with other associates. Is there any continuing threat for the public? And kudos to Ken Delaney and Tom Winter for putting this in proper context. We all came away from that press briefing saying, my goodness, they think he didn't act alone. What does that mean? And I think we've got proper context for that now. Not an active manhunt, not a belief necessarily that the public is in continuing danger, but that search of that house is critical as to, is there anybody out there who had knowledge of this, number one? Number two, is there any reason to believe that he truly was directed by ISIS? As Ken said, there's different levels of recruitment here, and a lone actor is very different than receiving direction and training from ISIS itself. The more time goes on, the more it looks like this was a solo actor. The question is why? What happened? I will note a couple of things that are noteworthy to me. First, his age. If you're talking about radicalization within violent Islamic Jihad, this is old. 42 years old is old, and it speaks to me about the possibility that he was a convert later in life. We don't know that for sure. I want to emphasize that, but it's on the older end of what you'd expect for someone who's going to become a martyr. Secondly, he seems to have disappeared, because by that I mean in terms of social media digital footprint. He should, at 42, have particularly somebody who was in business, realtor, whatever he was doing, should have a greater footprint on social media. He does not. It's very, very limited. That may be noteworthy.
Both of those pieces, the fact that he is on the older end, the fact that he seems to have disappeared, to not have a social media footprint of interest. Of course, there are also folks who are reeling from the fact that this is a person who served in the U.S. military. Does that surprise you, Frank?
Well, it doesn't. They're not. The U.S. military is not a monolith. They get training. They often see combat. Although there's no evidence of this that for this gentleman, he served in Afghanistan, but his mission was human resource specialist, and so that's not. We cannot assume from that he had any kind of IED training. Or anything like that. But no, nothing surprises us anymore. We saw veterans involved in violence on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol. So we, remember also from Texas, by the way, Fort Hood, the Fort Hood shooting was an Army physician who did that. So it does happen.
Frank, as you watch, it is New Year's Day. We're watching two potential terrorist activities explode onto the national stage. Can you give me a sense of how the FBI sort of investigates each individually and then assesses whether or not there is any connection between these two incidents?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of people now who are not getting that day off they thought they were getting, and it's connecting the dots that the FBI is particularly good at post 9/11. Now with the rest of the intelligence community. So there will be intelligence analysts at headquarters, at the two involved field offices, and they'll be asking the hard question, did we miss anything? Is anything connected here at all? Was this about targeting a Trump property because of international terrorism or because of some political domestic motivation? Who is the victim here? Who is the deceased person? Was that person actually the perpetrator, or were they duped into driving the Cybertruck? We still need to find that out.
A lot of questions. I also want to ask you, Frank, back to New Orleans. You had the city preparing to host the Sugar Bowl college football game at the Superdome tomorrow. That, of course, was originally scheduled for today. Can you give us a sense of how law enforcement assesses whether or not they have the infrastructure necessary to assess whether or not something like that is in fact safe, and if they have the additional resources necessary at a moment of heightened security?
Yeah, so interestingly, it won't be the FBI who comes in and says, we'll make the call on the Sugar Bowl. That's not going to happen that way. It will be a very collaborative law enforcement and government officials at the state and county and city level who come together and say, what's the intelligence we have right now? That's the first question. Is there any continuing threat? Yes or no? If there's any doubt, and I'll quote my friend Jim Kavanaugh, who was on with me earlier, you know, if you're in doubt, if there's any doubt, there's no doubt, you should not move forward, number one. And then, do we have the capacity to truly harden this down the way we want to? Good news, the Sugar Bowl and the other major bowl games are already major security events. I would feel very secure if I personally held tickets and I heard government officials saying, we've got this. I would not have any qualms personally about going. But you're going to see lots of extra bodies, for sure. We already heard the state officials saying we're bringing in National Guard military police units to help. There'll be a lot of extra bodies, a lot of pat downs. Go early. You're gonna be in a long line. They may push the perimeter out farther than ever before to make sure that if anything bad happens, it's not in the major crowd. It's not impacting the stadium. You're going to see all kinds of drones and aviation technology, and actually things that are even perhaps classified with regard to detection of certain biochem and radiological devices. They're going to pull out all the stops for this. And look, they'll make a call if they decide, you know what, we can't be certain that we've rounded everybody up and that there are more actors. They'll postpone it again.
Frank, all eyes tonight are on New Orleans, on Las Vegas, but I am sure that there are also law enforcement officials in other major American cities who are planning conversations about what this looks like for them. Talk us through the conversations that are likely happening, preparations that are likely taking place, just given what we have watched unfold today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've got the Rose Bowl parade, all the other bowl games, all kinds of things that are going on that are very open, very public, and generally looked at as softer, more vulnerable targets. And look, we've got to use technology to secure places. NYPD put more drones up in the air than ever before for New Year's Eve last night. And I think you're going to see more and more departments go to drones to focus in on people. You're going to see more and more use of facial recognition. And while that seemingly failed with regard to Luigi Mangione on the CEO murder, it is helpful in identifying and matching to known suspicious actors. It doesn't help you with an unknown. So, you know, if you're just kind of walking down into the stadium, you've got no terrorist watch on you, you've got no criminal record, no easy way to match you with records. That doesn't help. But it does help to see if we've got a known bad guy in the crowd.
Frank Figliuzzi, as always, thank you so much. We're going to be back with you a little later in the hour. Now to NBC News correspondent George Solis, who's joining us from New Orleans. George, I have watched you in that spot for the past few hours. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Alicia, I can tell you it's a very somber mood here. I mean, ordinarily on New Year's Day, you would see some revelers still out and about. You'd see the energy, you'd see the excitement here around Bourbon Street, and that is certainly not the case. You can see just behind me the police tape, the police presence here overpowering anything that is happening on the streets here, which is part of this growing investigation. You have the state police here, you have local police. We know other law enforcement agencies will be here on the ground beginning to pick up the pieces here. One thing that we can report from our affiliate here in town is that they do appear to have recovered all the bodies from the scene. Now begins that really long process of the identification. Again, that death toll now climbing to 15. You also have a number of college students around here and their families. I mean, keep in mind the Sugar Bowl was set to take place. You have members of the UGA alumni here. You have Notre Dame. Many of them wondering whether or not they'll go to that game tomorrow. That game, of course, now moved to 3 o'clock tomorrow. Again, the energy here, it's very, very different than what you would expect to see the day after New Year's. Many of them wondering if it is safe to be out and about. You heard from the officials here on the ground that even the governor plans on attending the game tomorrow. They are leaving no stone unturned. They are working and trying to assure everyone that the city is safe, although there's still so many questions about how all of this unfolded, Alicia.
George, the 15 people killed, as you noted, that death toll has risen. What do we know about them, who they are?
So there are obviously a lot of chatter online, and we want to be very careful about who we identify at this time, as we want to make sure that that next of kin is notified. But what I can tell you, just from our own independent reporting, we are learning that some of the victims from the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they claim that 2 Israeli citizens were injured in the incident. UGA announcing that one of their students was critically injured in the attack and is receiving medical treatment. And again, we are going to start to see some of those names trickle out there, and some of those pieces starting to come together. And unfortunately, again, as we are seeing the death toll already climb, we are hearing that some of the injuries of those that were wounded in this terrible attack are pretty serious and severe. One can hope that medical professionals are doing their part to make sure more lives are spared.
George, for anyone who's not been in New Orleans, the area you are standing in right now is dense, packed with hotels, packed with tourists. As you said, there are a lot of folks who are in town for the holiday, for this game. What are police officials telling tourists who are seeking to stay or to clear out the area?
Yeah, looking around, again, you can't really tell from where I'm standing, but I actually can tell you there's tourists that are out milling about. Of course, many of them overtaken by curiosity about what happened here, and of course by the large media presence. Right now, there is no lockdown here in the city, so you do see the police sort of engaging with the tourists and the people of the community here. They want to make sure that people feel safe in this town. As you mentioned, this is a historic area, the French Quarter, ordinarily bustling with a lot of music, a lot of people, the bars, restaurants, some of them open here off to my distance. So again, you still see a sense of normalcy, but obviously there is nothing normal about what is happening here today.
All of our hearts with the city of New Orleans today. NBC's George Solis. Thank you, George. Still ahead, much more on what we are learning about the suspect, a U.S. military veteran, and how people are radicalized. We are back after this.
If you have heart disease and struggle with LDL-C,
even with statins and diet,
listen to your heart.
Talk to your doctor about Repatha.
Repatha plus a statin lowers LDL-C by 63%. Do not take Repatha if you're allergic to it. Serious allergic reactions can occur. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Common side effects include runny nose, sore throat, common cold symptoms, flu or flu-like symptoms, back pain, high blood sugar, and redness, pain, or bruising at the injection site. Ask about Repatha.
One of those soccer, swim, and softball after school kind of days, huh? Don't stress. HelloFresh has dinner covered. With tons of delicious recipes you can pull together in no time, no matter what your week looks like. So even on a barely time to eat type of day, you can still get a homemade meal on the table that the whole family will love. HelloFresh, homemade, made easy.
Some people like doing things the hard way, like doing their finances with a spreadsheet instead of using Quicken. Quicken pulls all your financial info together in one place and updates it automatically. How easy is that?
48% of Americans don't get enough magnesium, which is vital for bone, nerve, and muscle health. I recommend Cunol's magnesium glycinate. It's formulated for high absorption and is gentle on the stomach. Cunol, the brand I trust.
We need your help. Go online, call, or scan this code to support WWF's global conservation efforts by symbolically adopting an elephant for only $16 a month. It's just 53 cents a day to protect wildlife and their habitats. Do it in the next 5 minutes, and you'll get this free adoption kit with this plush keepsake. Go online, call, or scan to help make a difference today.
For plant-based healthy blood pressure support, there's one brand at Walmart that stands above the rest. It's Super Beets. Discover why more cardiologists recommend Super Beets for heart health support than any other beet brand at superbeets.com.
Hi, Susan. Honey.
Yeah?
I respect that, but that cough looks pretty bad. Try this Robitussin honey.
The real honey you love, plus the powerful cough relief you need.
Mind if I root through your trash?
Robitussin, with real honey and elderberry.
Let's run it. You already know. I told y'all to run that. Come on now.
Download the Prize Picks app today. Enter $5 and get $50 instantly. Prize Picks. Run your game.
It's a lot to be a caregiver and a daughter because you kind of have to take a step back. Getting some help would be a great relief.
From companions to helpers to caregivers. Find all the senior care you need at care.com.
For years, I was stuck using traditional foundation. They'd always cake or crease in my fine line. That's why I created Bake, Balance, and Brighten, our award-winning foundation for mature skins. You'll love how it feels and how you'll look. Learn more at laurageller.com.
Each week on my podcast, I'm joined by uniquely qualified guests who help me take a big picture look at the issues, like Representative Jasmine Crockett, late night host Seth Meyers, former Attorney General Eric Holder, and many more. Why is this happening? Listen now.
Stay informed on the biggest issues of the day. MSNBC has you covered wherever you are. Watch, read, and listen. For the in-depth coverage and analysis you need, stay with MSNBC.
As we come on the air, we are learning that there will be a press conference at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department headquarters at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. We're going to bring that to you as soon as we have it. We are also learning more about the deadly attack in New Orleans early this morning, including about the suspect, Shamsud Din Jabbar. He's an American citizen from Texas, and he served on active duty in the Army as an administrative clerk for nearly a decade, including a deployment to Afghanistan before he was honorably discharged in 2020. What we do not know yet is how he might have become radicalized to commit mass violence, or whether he had any help along the way. Back with me, Frank Figluzzi, and joining us, Javed Ali, who worked for more than 20 years in the Pentagon, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security. He now teaches counterterrorism at the University of Michigan. It is good to see you both. Javed, I want to begin with you. I had asked Frank Figluzzi earlier, what about this suspect most surprised him? He pointed both to the suspect's age, to the fact that he had disappeared for a period of time, did not have a significant digital footprint. With the little that we know, what stands out to you?
Well, thanks for having me this evening. And based on what's come out about this individual, he seems to fit the very randomized pattern of other individuals we've seen for more than 20 years in the aftermath of 9/11, of people who fall down these sort of rabbit holes of radicalization as Americans, and there's no profile for this. I actually looked at this for a long time in my different government positions, and we were searching to see if there was some kind of set of common factors or patterns of behavior or things that would help law enforcement and intelligence to sort of get more upstream of this kind of activity to stop threats. And despite all of that analysis, we couldn't really, at the end of the day, come up with any grand insights on this. So we're going to find out that with this person, it probably took a combination of factors that drove him over a several-year period to committing this type of attack.
But for those who are watching and say, how could someone who served in the U.S. military be radicalized? How could they carry out an attack like this? What do you say to them?
Well, unfortunately, we've already seen another example of this. If your viewers remember, in 2008, Major Nidal Hassan at Fort Hood, Texas, murdered several of his fellow Army soldiers because he also had fallen under the spell of jihadist radicalization for quite a long period of time. And rather than trying to commit an attack outside an Army base, he did it to his fellow soldiers in a mess hall, actually. And he was a major and a medical doctor. And so very different kind of profile from the person who committed the attack last night. But it's not, we've seen this before where other folks with military backgrounds have fallen into this. And the same thing goes for individuals and the other sort of end of the ideological spectrum of white supremacy, neo-Nazi. There are lots of people also with former military and law enforcement backgrounds. So this is another really troubling aspect of radicalization and extremism in the United States.
Frank, we keep talking about potential ties to ISIS. Can you give us a sense of how that then becomes investigated, substantiated by law enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, think of this as an inverse pyramid. You start big with regard to the intelligence community and our allies internationally, who will be asked, I'm sure they've already been asked, do you have anything on this individual, any indication that he's experienced training, he's traveled and been radicalized? You got anything at all? And if that answer comes back no, and even if it comes back yes, then the pyramid gets tighter as we get into his residence and his devices, which is already happening. And you look for this kind of more localized radicalization, online radicalization. What is he watching? What are the videos? Are there radical sermons? But, you know, as Javed has referenced, there's no magic formula here. Many people who are even martyring themselves don't fit a certain cookie cutter profile because they've got many other things going on in their lives that lends them to this recruitment scenario. There's something other than true belief in violent jihad that gets people to this point, often, not always, but often, to be able to martyr themselves.
For those of you who are just joining us, President Biden will be speaking at 6:30. We will take that live as soon as we have it. Javed, I've asked Frank this question as it relates to the FBI, but given your experience at Homeland Security, at the Pentagon, what are the conversations that are likely happening inside those institutions about, one, how this guy didn't show up on anyone's radar, assuming that he did not, and two, how this changes the assessment of the threat level in the country right now?
Well, going back for quite some period of time, that both at the Pentagon and other government agencies, there have been efforts to try to figure out, you know, people who have taken an oath to uphold the American Constitution and defend the country. Are there ways that these signs of radicalization and perhaps even mobilization of violence can be detected? And the Pentagon has tried to put some of these programs in place, both on the jihadist side and on the sort of neo-Nazi, white supremacy side of things. You know, it's hard to know from the outside now looking in how effective those programs are, but this is all based on the recognition that our own government or people in our own government institutions aren't immune from this. And going back to the case of Major Nidal Hasan in 2008, he was exhibiting some pretty troubling signs, but none of those signs were troubling enough for him to get either referred to FBI earlier or even the Army Criminal Intelligence Division or other criminal investigators in the Army, and then he was able to carry out his attack. And so this is just another part of the threat landscape that has to be looked at. You know, even people inside our own government can fall prey to these things. And how do you find those people before they're willing to go out and act violently?
A reminder that we are waiting for President Biden, who is at Camp David. He is slated to speak any moment. Frank, as always, you will forgive me if I have to interrupt you for the President of the United States, but I'm grateful to Javed for the context he is giving us and reminding us that extremism is a clear and present danger in many forms, that this is something that is being reckoned with at a societal level, at an institutional level. I wonder what you expect to hear, Frank, from the President of the United States, not only about what we have seen in New Orleans, but about the larger moment we find ourselves in.
Well, we're going to hear, of course, that all federal resources have been brought to bear. That's an obvious statement. But knowing Joe Biden, he tends to wax a bit and get philosophical about the situation we're in. We've been in a heightened threat environment, certainly at least since October 7th and the attack on Israel. over and over again from the FBI director, the DHS secretary who testified on Capitol Hill, that there's something out there, that there's a heightened threat because of this, that there's calls for jihad against the West generally. So that kind of thing, when you hear government officials, particularly the FBI director, Chris Wray, who's been really kind of tight-lipped on such things, when you hear them say that with confidence, that we're looking at a threat, that it's out there, it's coming, and you say it repeatedly, they have the intelligence available to them to know we're under threat. And I think Biden's going to remind us that these are harrowing times. And unfortunately, on a happy day, a first day of the year, those holidays do become targets in and of themselves because of national attention and big events happening. He's the great consoler. You'll probably hear him talk about the victims here. And I think that's important, that people are suffering today because of evil, because of hatred, because of violence.
Javed, striking to me, the FBI ordinarily does not put out photos of a suspect as early as they did in this investigation, but they are seeking any help, any leads that they may be able to get. What type of information is most useful to them at this point in this investigation?
Well, Frank knows this better than I do because Frank was an agent and I was not. But by getting the picture out and getting the name out so quickly, this is an attempt to help broaden the pool of information about Shamsuddin Jabbar. Why did he commit this attack? How long did it take him to plan and prepare for it? Are there other people who potentially either were aware of it or perhaps assisted or enabled it? That story has changed throughout the day. But now it seems like it's more into the lone wolf category, at least right now, or lone offender category. And I think this is the right thing to do, just to have the public come forward and provide information about Jabbar, even though he is dead, to help close some of these gaps or fill in information where the FBI is still unclear on how to answer some of these questions.
Frank, Javed kicked it over to you, so I am going to do the same. The decision to share that photo, to share it so early in this investigation, seeking help from anyone who might have information. What is the information that the FBI is likely looking for?
Yeah, look, this is a sign that we understand today's reality, that crowdsourcing solutions to a crime is the way to go. We saw it work effectively with regard to the CEO, Brian Thompson's murder in New York. The answer is out there, as they say, and that's with all of us who might know his associates, know what got him interested in radicalization or radical ideology. That kind of thing, even little things like, hey, he stayed at my place 2 weeks ago. I saw him at the Motel 6 as he was journeying from Texas to Louisiana. Any tidbit that can help the investigation, it becomes part of a puzzle that the FBI is trying to assemble right now.
Right, and of course the question that matters to the people of New Orleans, and certainly the victims and their family, which is why New Orleans, why on this day. Javed, if the point here is to make sure that America is safe and secure, if we are probing these questions in the interest of our safety and our security, how does leaving the door open to xenophobia, to Islamophobia in this discourse actually make us less safe in this moment?
Well, we're going to find out going forward. In the past, there have been, going back now almost a decade, in 2015, 2016, into 2017, there were other ISIS-inspired attacks in the United States, if your viewers remember, in San Bernardino, in Orlando, and then in New York City. And all of those people were Muslims as well. The first two, San Bernardino and Orlando, were also American citizens. The third in New York in October 2017 was not a citizen, but Muslim as well. And that didn't lead to at least an overwhelming sense of Islamophobia and xenophobia then. But we'll see how it plays out going forward. And hopefully one of the things that President Biden will do is obviously denounce the attack itself, but not do anything to sort of fan the flames of because Jabbar was an American Muslim, to suggest that there's something else, there's a bigger threat from American Muslims beyond just this evil attack itself. So We've seen a pattern of these ISIS-inspired, and before that, a decade prior, al-Qaeda-inspired attacks, but hopefully it doesn't lead to a backlash against the broader American Muslim population.
We are, of course, waiting for President Biden to deliver remarks on the latest developments from New Orleans. He is at Camp David. We're going to take those remarks as soon as we see the president. I am curious, Frank, the nature of this attack, the fact that it was a motor vehicle, the ways in which that makes it more complex, both for the FBI to catch some of these suspects, the way it makes it more difficult for law enforcement to protect folks from an attack like this. What do we need to know?
I think it's the simplicity of using an automobile to carry out a terror attack that actually makes it so much harder for the FBI to get out in front of it. Anyone can rent a car or truck. You've got that going for you. You could even steal an automobile, which would make it even harder to trace you, perhaps. And it's that availability of the automobile. You know, we can talk about very sophisticated bombings, chemical attacks, all of that. And by the way, the U.S. government is excellent at detecting and mitigating against those sophisticated attacks. But renting a truck and driving it into a crowd while shooting a long gun is almost, is almost too easy, because law enforcement isn't able to detect that ahead of time. That's the problem. And he's likely seen the success of similar attacks around the world, and very recently in Germany at the Christmas market. And he said, look, this has worked over time. It's proven. Go with what you know. That's what I'll be doing.
I wonder also the fact that there were believed to be explosive devices, Frank, what that tells you.
Yeah, and let's all be cautious about the reports, because as Ken Boydian and Tom Winter have helped us with, maybe some of those were not really IEDs, but indeed, if they've got actual wires and batteries and pipes, right now, I can assure you, if that's the case, they're trying to figure out, would this actually have detonated? Would this have worked? And if it would have worked, he's got that knowledge from somewhere or some person, because when you look at his military background, basically an HR specialist, sometime maybe as an IT specialist, none of that smells like any kind of official bomb training. He would have likely learned that elsewhere. And by the way, not hard to learn. Unfortunately, get on the internet and you'll find the instructions.
Frank Figliuzzi, as always, thank you so much for your expertise. Professor Javed Ali, thank you, sir, for being with us. We're awaiting President Biden. He's going to speak on today's attack in New Orleans. We're going to bring that to you next.
Introducing new Oroxon Gel, the first FDA-cleared ED treatment available without a prescription. Oroxon Gel is clinically proven to work within 10 minutes, so you and your partner can experience the heights of intimacy. New Oroxon ED Treatment Gel.
I go by Jackie. I'm 44 years old. I had 3 kids at the time and single mother. I was working 60 hours a week, still couldn't pay the bills, skipped meals so that they could eat. It's been hard because one thing falls into place, 10 things fall out of place. I just can't do this alone and make it work.
1 in 5 children face hunger in America, and food costs are rising. But everyone needs nourishing food to thrive, and they can when we work together so our neighbors can feed their families. Call or go online right now to join Feeding America with your gift of just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day. Together, thanks to a nationwide network of food banks, dedicated volunteers, and the monthly support of people like you, we can fill plates with nutritious food for families across America.
One day, my mother came over to my house and said, "There's a meeting at the pantry." I said, "Okay," and I went. There were some ladies in there. They were from the food bank. They asked several questions. Some of those were about me and my story, but it helped me to open up a little bit.
We're getting closer to the day when no one in America faces hunger, but we can't do it without you. Call or go online now. Visit helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day. 98% of donations go directly to help millions of people facing hunger, from coast to coast and in your own community. And when you give by credit card, we'll send you this exclusive canvas grocery bag to show you are a
six-month commission to figure it out. I think it's pretty obvious. You know, the discussion at the press conference today where, you know, leaders are incredulous that a terrorist would drive over a sidewalk and, you know, oh my gosh, violate the traffic law and, you know, jump up on the curb. Well, he'd run over a patrolman if he had to go on his murderous rampage. And the fact that anyone could be surprised by that, it's shocking to me. Certainly that law enforcement professionals wouldn't see that right away. Now, we're not talking about, Alicia, trying to protect every sidewalk in a city the size of New Orleans. That's not possible. But to protect the sidewalk of the iconic center on Bourbon Street is possible and very easily. And I think what's going to happen, you know, they're going to be mired down in litigation now, the city, from the families of all these deceased victims there. I mean, with the money they're going to pay to fight the lawsuits and that, they could have bought a fleet of new dump trucks to encircle the whole French Quarter. It is a lack of sitting down and having some ranking commander responsible for each particular section and method of attack And, you know, I found this in all my bombing investigations and snipers and killers and murders and chaos, that I often had to assign a person specifically. You know, you are the special agent that's going to be assigned to take this task on and make sure that this happens. So in other words, the chiefs to say to a lieutenant, you're the lieutenant in charge of vehicle attacks in Bourbon Street. You have to make sure that the French Quarter cannot be subject to a vehicle attack. And you have to think outside the box. I mean, parking two police cruisers, that's not protection. An assailant can show up in a dump truck and push the two police cruisers all the way down Bourbon Street in front of the dump truck, running over everybody. So you have to think about what could happen and have a responsible ranking person to ensure. The same with explosive attacks, firearms attacks, you know, even drone attacks. If you can't encompass it all, you're missing it, obviously, then, you know, you've got to break it down, get ranking commanders for those things and possible avenues of attack, and lock them down. And they didn't do that. You know, they're professing today to us all that this is the safest city, but we all see it's not. So, you know, I think the governor, you just played the clip, and I think he made the best statements today as, you know, the one leader who seemed to want to accept responsibility for the failure and, you know, sounded strong that we're going to correct the mistakes, find out what they are.
Cedric,
I don't think it's going to take long to find that out.
Well, Cedric, at the same time that there were mistakes, there was also incredible acts of bravery on the part of some of these first responders who showed up at this scene. It now comes in the wake of the city hosting a number of big events, right? You have the Sugar Bowl, the college football game supposed to be today has been postponed to tomorrow. You've got the Super Bowl, you've got Mardi Gras. Talk about the coordination that requires on the part of local law enforcement and the real tax it puts on law enforcement officers.
Well, you know, these huge events are not new to New Orleans, as we all well know. They've been managing Bourbon Street for a very, very, very long time, since the beginning history of that city. And they've been managing other major events, from Super Bowls to major college bowls games and parades, et cetera, over the years. So they have the experience, they have the personnel, and et cetera. But, you know, going back to something Jim Common was just mentioning, is yes, they should have been much more better prepared for a January 1, 2025 night on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and of course followed by a Sugar Bowl game where you have thousands of people that are in town and those that are local who are out enjoying the festivities of a new year. But I think one of the most important things here I think will be reconciled over time is then their after action reporting. They'll be able to see where their flaws were. Were there some things they could have done better? Yes. Were there things they did well? Yes. They were able to certainly neutralize this attacker before he caused any other further harm in that community. And I just think over time, as we gather more information about this a murderer, and as we learn more about what we could have done better, you will see those things, of course, rectified. But New Orleans has a long history of doing good police work and have many of the same challenges as many other police departments across the country. But in the grand scheme of all of this, there's certainly something for them to learn in terms of what they can do better going forward. But I also think this needs to be a clear wake-up call to every city across this country that hosts, whether it's a small town event or a large city event, is that we need to take more precautions and make sure we have all the necessary personnel, equipment, et cetera, we need in any type of street event.
Cedric Alexander, Jim Kavanaugh, thank you both so much for joining us. Now, we are waiting for President Biden's remarks on this morning's attack in New Orleans. Stay with us. We hope to bring it to you on the other side of this break.
I remember seeing St. Jude commercials on TV and wondering, like, is that place legit? Like, those commercials are nice, but is that like a real thing? And having lived it, I can say for sure that that money is being put to incredible use. I've never once had to wait for insurance to approve a test or approve a medication. We didn't have to worry about any of those things thanks to the donations. And our family is forever grateful because it's completely changed our lives.
Hi, Susan. Honey.
Yeah?
I respect that, but that cough looks pretty bad. Try this Robitussin honey.
The real honey you love, plus the powerful cough relief you need.
Mind if I root through your trash?
Robitussin with real honey and elderberry.
I wonder if this golf cart has hands-free driving. It didn't, but my Skechers slip-ins are completely hands-free. I just step in and they're on.
Nothing is more important than family. A family you're born into, a family you choose, or a family you make. I'm Padma Lakshmi. I came to this country when I was 4 years old with my mother. We came here because it was a land of opportunity. But for many, that's not the case.
Porque primero me separaron de mi mamá y de ahí de mi hermano.
Immigrant families are being separated. Black and brown families are torn apart by a broken legal system. LGBTQ people suffer discrimination in adoption and healthcare. The need to protect and defend the civil liberties we all hold dear is more urgent than ever because families belong together. You can help by joining the American Civil Liberties Union today.
There's this thing called age, and it sucks.
If you're over 50, imagine you could turn back the clock on your stiff, achy joints by years. Introducing InstaFlex Advanced.
It's restored my joints without just temporarily masking my symptoms. It's so powerful. I had better knees in just 1 week.
Get a complimentary sample just by texting BLEND to 42424. Plus, text now, and we'll include a tube of InstaFlex pain cream for fast-acting relief absolutely free.
I love how light it feels. It's not heavy, it's not cakey. I feel like I'm not wearing any makeup at all. I don't see any other reason to try any other makeup foundation ever.
This is not an ideologically pure cabinet.
What are your concerns with this incoming administration as it pertains to mass deportations?
What's your message to concerned voters about where the country may be headed after the Biden administration leaves?
America will move forward as it always has.
Back with our special coverage of the attack in New Orleans. We are learning more about the victims who were killed when a man drove a pickup truck at high speed around 3 a.m. on Bourbon Street into a crowd ringing in the new year. FBI officials say at least 15 people were killed, dozens more were injured. Police say the majority of victims appear to be locals and not tourists. NBC News confirmed that 37-year-old Reggie Hunter is among those killed. His cousin describing Hunter as a doting father, 2 boys, ages 11 years old and 1 year old. NBC News also confirming Martin Tiger Besh was killed. He graduated high school in Lafayette, Louisiana in 2015. He's remembered as a standout in football, lacrosse, and track and field. Joining me now, Greg LaRose, editor of the Louisiana Illuminator. Greg, thank you so much for being with us as you continue to cover this story. What more do you want us to know about the human toll here?
Yeah, you know, one thing, I believe New Orleans is familiar with mass casualties, whether, you know, we're talking about a hurricane, you know, we're no stranger to mass shootings, and that doesn't really numb us from what happened today. I think it served as a real wake-up call that these events that we think, or may have thought, were limited to cities like New York, Berlin, major, you know, global centers, or, you know, we're just as vulnerable. And I think that's like leading people to really take a step back and kind of look at an overall security situation now.
Especially for a city that has too often been called upon to be resilient. Both to you and to our viewers at home, we are awaiting President Biden, who is planning to make remarks about what happened today in New Orleans. So, Greg, you will forgive me if I need to interrupt you for the President of the United States. But tell me what you think it is that folks in New Orleans need and want to hear from the President of the United States.
I think they're going to want to hear more details in regards to the extent to which the FBI will go to find out just how wide of a web was cast between the known suspect that was behind the wheel of the pickup truck and what officials are saying are his accomplices. You know, we are getting reports of a nearby house fire that officials have said is connected to the attack. There's surveillance video that shows three men and one woman placing an explosive device in the French Quarter. So these are things I think, understandably, they have people on edge, and anything that, you know, the president and any other leader for that matter can say to assure people that they're safe while the investigation occurs, I think would be helpful.
And just to clarify, the FBI has updated the information on, and NBC News is reporting that the three folks who were believed to potentially have acted in conjunction with the main suspect turns out to simply have been bystanders. That one point has been clarified, but I hear you on the broader point. This is also a city that is got a big calendar coming up, the Sugar Bowl, which was supposed to, as you well know, be today, postponed to tomorrow. The Super Bowl, of course, the iconic celebrations of Mardi Gras. I'm going to go now to the President of the United States.
No, I can speak for all Americans when I say our hearts are with the people of New Orleans after the despicable attack that occurred in the early morning hours. To all the families of those who were killed, to all those who were injured, to all the people of New Orleans who are grieving today, I want you to know I grieve with you. Our nation grieves with you. We're going to stand with you as you mourn and as you heal in the weeks to come. I want to thank our brave first responders and law enforcement personnel who stopped the attacker in his tracks before he could kill or injure even more people. And I want to thank you to everyone at the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, including the FBI, for working nonstop to investigate this heinous act. The FBI is leading the investigation to determine what happened, why it happened, and whether there was any continuing threat to public safety. Here's what we know so far. The FBI has reported to me the killer was an American citizen, born in Texas. He served in the United States Army on active duty for many years. He also served in the Army Reserve until a few years ago. The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill, The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack. Possible explosives were found in the vehicle as well, and more explosives were found nearby. The situation is very fluid, and the investigation has a preliminary stage. And the fact is that right now, excuse me, there you go. The law enforcement and intelligence community are continuing to look for any connections, associations, or co-conspirators. We have nothing additional to report at this time. The investigation is continuing to be active, and no one should jump to conclusions. I've directed my Attorney General, the FBI Director, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, and the intelligence community to work on this intensively until we have a full and complete information. And once we have that information, I will share that information as soon